Howdy, my name is Casey Davis, and I'm here with you guys again today for the WaterWise virtual series. Today's topic is going to be on natives and other easy to grow plants. So let's get started. If you remember, last week we discussed quite a few different easy to grow plants, a lot in the cacti and succulents family. So we're going to pick up from there and specifically talk about Texas superstars in today's program. So Texas superstars derived from the earthkind gardening mentality. And so what is earthkind? It is a landscape program that uses research-proven, time-honored techniques, provides maximum garden and landscape enjoyment. It preserves and protects the environment, and it combines the best principles of organics and traditional gardening and landscaping to create horticultural system based on real-world effectiveness and environmental responsibility. So that's kind of how it all falls in line with being water wise and conserving waters, that these types of plants do well in our climate or the specific climate that you're looking into and what plants you're looking into. So I mentioned last week, there are many ways to utilize earthkind gardening and the Texas superstars. There's lots of resources out there. One of them is going to be the earthkind gardening website, aggie-horticulture.tmu.edu/earthkind. So that's one way to get to it. Then also we have the earthkind plant selector, which I'm going to come back and go over at the end. But this is how you get to it. So you go to urbanlandscapeguide.tmu.edu, and there's a link on the previous page too, on the Aggie Horticulture page. But you go to that urbanlandscapeguide.tmu.edu and click on Earthkind Plant Selector, and that's how you get to that. In addition to those resources, what I didn't talk about last week is that there is actually a Texas Superstar website. It's got lots of resources on it within itself, and it also links back to the Earthkind website too. So lots of ways to get this information that I'm about to provide for you. And again, I am going to just kind of be touching the surface, giving an overview of a few of the many plants that are out there that qualify for being Texas superstars. So again, you can get any more detail on this information by contacting me or utilizing these resources. So in addition to the online platform, on this website here, if you scroll down on this left-hand column, you'll get down to where it says color brochure. And we've got a printed publication that has all the information I'm going to give you and more. So if you're more of a in-person, hands-on kind of person, then we have a few of these publications in our office that we do offer. And this one has actually just been updated for 2020. So most of the copies I have are the 2019 version. They're still beneficial. Not much at all has changed. A few more plants have been added. So, you can definitely come by and get one of my versions and then supplement it and print out, the copies of the new things that have been added from this one. So I'm going to jump right into it now. Excuse me. So these are all the plants we're going to discuss today. We've got some from the annuals, perennials, perennials, woody shrubs, trees, and then specialty plants. So we've got some from each section that I'm going to go over. And again, some of these may be natives, some of them may be adapted or introduced species. And this Superstar book has all that information. So again, I'm not going to cover all of it, but I'm going to introduce them to you. If any of these plants sound interesting and you want to learn more, then just hang tight, stay online with me here, and we're going to get to them. We're going to start in order, of course, and go annuals, perennials, and lastly to specialty plants. So all right, so the first one we've got here is a type of snapdragon, Angelonia species. It is an annual. It does well in full sun, in containers, and even on bordering flower beds. So it blooms from summer until the first frost, and they can get pretty tall. They can get 12 to 18 inches tall and sometimes 14 inches wide. So snapdragons are ones that I really like. They do well in my yard. I often have them in containers. And so they do really well, and they mix well with other species of plants too. Larkspur, this one is another pretty one. It's really tiny flowers clustered to make a larger group of flowers. It's an annual, but it does reseed well. So it'll do well to leave seeds, and then those seeds will sprout for next year, and you'll have potential growth for next year as well. So it does well in full sun to partial shade. It gets 3 foot tall to 1 foot wide. It blooms in the spring, so it's a little bit early plant. You're not going to see those blooms throughout the entire summer. It does well in large mass plantings or even in containers, and these make really pretty dried or cut flowers as well. Marigons. So this is a cool season annual, so they bloom later in the year. Right now, they're going to be really popular. And there's a few different species, the Antigua, Discovery, Tahitian, and Tahitian series. So you can see on the right-hand side there, they're all slightly different, very thick, full flowers. They do well in containers here. They're going to get about 1 foot tall by 1 foot wide and do well up until a frost, like I said, and we want them in full sun as well. Okay, petunias are another annual that we like to include here. The specific varieties of the Laura Bush Violet, Tidal Wave Cherry, Petunia, Laura Bush Pink, excuse me, and the Tidal Wave Silver. Now these are full sun, but do as I say, not as I do. I've had lots of beautiful petunias do really well in my yard in pots and hanging baskets specifically. And then this year I had one that did not do so well. So they do require pretty regular watering. And like I said, they're good in full sun, but I would be careful by putting it in complete direct sunlight and not keeping it watered, because mine definitely got dried out over a weekend. I was gone. So definitely needs regular watering, even if you're gone for just a weekend, I would say. So these bloom all summer long until the first frost. Very pretty, do very well in containers or hanging baskets. All right, I believe this is our last annual, and I should have started with this. So what is an annual? An annual is going to be a plant that dies back every year, and you're going to need to replace it or collect seeds from it every year in order to have that plant, have another plant like that essentially come back, or buy a new one each year. So the last group, the last annual that we've got today are Whopper begonias. So these are Texas size and a much larger plant. They do well in shade or partial shade. They like the morning sun, but it is going to get a little bit hot for them, especially in the Northeast Texas general area. So that's pretty much what I'm speaking of about all these plants, is in the Northeast Texas area. So these do well. They get about 24 to 30 inches tall, so they can get pretty large. And then they do well along borders or in containers. All right, moving on to perennials. So what is a perennial? That is going to be something that it may die back in the winter, or it may go dormant, rather, you would say, in the winter, but it's going to come back year after year in its active blooming season, okay? So the first one is Napier grass, and I got to be honest, this one I'm not as familiar with. There are two varieties here, Black Stockings on the left and Princess Caroline you see there on the right. So those are a wide-leafed grassy plant with a deep purple color. They obviously get very large, very neat-looking plants. Like I said, this is one I'm not too familiar with, but definitely something if you're interested in a grassy landscape plant, then this one will do really well for you. All right, salvias. So there are a few different species of salvia that we consider to be Texas superstars. The Mystic Spires blue salvia is going to be a more compact plant, and it thrives in heat and humidity. It's going to bloom in the spring and summer. They do well for cut flowers, and they do well in flower beds or even in containers. You want full sun, and they can get up to 30 inches tall. Now, I bought some of these for the first time this year, and I was really excited about them. I got them, well, I'm not sure, I don't remember where I got them from, but I knew they were superstars. And of course, I could have had a different variety, because sometimes, you know, when you purchase them and they're supposed to be a certain variety, occasionally that doesn't happen. And I want to say I got them from like a big box store, so that can happen there. They didn't do so well in my yard. I had them in what I thought was full sun, but I actually think that I had a tree that produced a little bit more overcast and kept them from getting the amount of sun that they needed. So again, do as I say here. These like full sun, and apparently I did not have them in the right place, so mine did not do well. All right, moving on to a couple of the other varieties. We've got the Henry Dulberg Salvia and the Mexican bush sage. These are going to be larger plants. They're not going to be as compact as that previous one that I talked about. So both of these are pretty low maintenance, heat and drought tolerant. They produce showy flowers, big, beautiful purple, bluish flowers. Your Henry Dulberg is going to get 3 to 6 feet tall. Your Mexican bush is going to get 3 to 4 foot tall. So again, these are going to be larger than that first one. Okay, more perennials here. We've got your flare hibiscus. Y'all gonna have to tell me which one is right on that. But anyways, I love hibiscus. They're beautiful plants with big, full flowers. Here we've got the flare on the left, the peppermint flare in the middle, and the pink flare on the right. So I can tell you these pretty much do bloom nonstop. They're, putting out blooms all the time. They need full sun, and they are pretty low maintenance once you get them established. They do get pretty large, can get up to 4 by 6 foot wide and tall. So these guys do get pretty big, but I love hibiscus. So definitely actually have a Texas Star hibiscus and another winter hardy hibiscus in my yard right now. So those, I know the Texas Star is considered a superstar, but the other winter hardy ones, they're kind of new varieties, so they may be added here soon, but definitely love the hibiscus. Okay, another perennial. It's one that I have in my yard that requires absolutely no maintenance from me. And it could be because mine's really well established and been there forever, but if you're looking for something that gets pretty large and you need a good ground cover, or even almost like a shrub, this will do it for you. So it's a root hardy perennial. And in some zones, it can be evergreen. Here in Northeast Texas, it does die back in the winter. You want to put that in full sun to part sun. Mine is mostly in full sun, but there's a little crapemyrtle tree that does give it a little shade in the afternoon. So they do well in both of those. Flowers from late spring through fall. It's definitely blooming right now. There are a few different cultivars, the Big Mama, the Pam Puryear, and the white ones. Mine is definitely this orange one like it's pictured here. So they get 3 to 6 foot tall and wide, and they can be whacked. So you can cut them back and they'll grow back. It's definitely not a problem. If they get out of hand, you can cut them back a little bit. So again, doesn't require very much maintenance at all. I water my whole flower bed if it's getting real dry, but typically the average rainfall here, again in Northeast Texas, takes care of this plant. All right, moving on to perennials. So what is a perennial? Well, you may also hear this called a tender perennial. And in fact, in some places, they're still going to be referred to as annuals. So a perennial is going to be something that the plant, let's see here, the plant structure, the way the plant is made, essentially, it's going to be a perennial. So it's going to be something that has the capacity to come back year after year. But in some zones and climates, it's going to either get too cold or too hot, depending on the plant. for it to be able to stay dormant, stay alive while it's dormant, and come back for the next year. So it's going to be something that in the exact perfect climate and environment for that specific plant, sure, it's going to be a perennial. It's going to come back for you every year. But if you've got it planted somewhere else that's not quite the perfect setting for it, then it's probably only going to be an annual. And some of these you can collect seeds and replant the seeds every year and have a new plant grow. It really just depends on that plant. So this one, the little ruby, it's for the most part considered an annual. In some zones, in some areas, it can be a perennial for you. So you want this in full to part sun. It gets 12 to 15 inches tall and 14 to 16 inches wide. So it gets fairly large to be a good little ground cover for you. And it also does okay in containers. All right, Duranta or Brazilian sky flower. This is a really pretty one. The flowers are real dainty. So it's going to be a tender perennial. It's going to be one of those in some areas, you know, it can come back year after year. But in some areas where there's a frost, it'll go dormant and potentially die back at the end of that season. So you want this in full to part sun. It gets 6 to 8 foot tall, so pretty tall, and about 4 to 6 foot wide. It's going to bloom up until the first frost. All right, another perennial is firebush. This one I am really not that familiar with, but I think it's so cool. So you can see the few different pictures we've got there. Once it blooms, it really looks like the bush is on fire. It takes over that plant. So so this one is interesting. It's going to be one that I read up on a little bit more and see if I want to put it in my garden. You want to put it in full sun. It gets about 3 foot tall and wide, and it blooms summer up until the first frost. Okay, another perennial is going to be the Gold Star Esperanza. These are golden yellow bell-shaped flowers, and they flower from late spring until the first frost. Can be semi-evergreen, so if you're in one of those areas where this plant's going to be a perennial, then it'll stay evergreen throughout that dormant season. Landscape, it can get 4 to 8 foot tall. However, it is deer resistant, but it attracts pollinators. So that's interesting for that one. And you want to put it in full to part sun. Okay, another one that looks kind of similar from a distance, they've got the same color flowers, is going to be Theralis or Shower of Gold. So you've got season-long spikes of bright yellow flowers. You want to plant this one in full sun. It can get about 4 to 6 foot tall, and in those places, again, it's going to be an evergreen shrub where it's going to be a perennial. Again, it is deer resistant and is going to attract pollinators. Okay, I believe this is our last perennial. This is another one I've heard of, but I'm really not that familiar with, but it is beautiful. Y'all, look at the dainty little flowers with so much detail. Definitely going to learn a little bit more about this one. So in zone 10, it actually grows large enough and is a perennial and is considered a tree. In zone 9, it's going to be a shrub. And in zone 6 and 7, which I believe this Northeast Texas area is going to be in zone 7, I think. And so it's only going to be an annual here. It likes warmth. So yeah, it likes that full sun. Can get about 8 to 12 inches tall and wide. Requires low water maintenance or low water. And again, any soil pH. So again, that's one of those that's going to be pretty low maintenance for us. Alrighty. Okay, moving on to woody shrubs. So this one here, Vitex, also known as the Texas lilac, very beautiful little plant here. Can get very large. So I've only just been introduced to these. I've got a couple in my yard, and they're pretty small right now. They look like a little mini version of that tree on the left. Mine are they're less than 3 feet tall. So, so this one might be kind of a slow grower. Considered a tree in some places, considered a shrub in others. Again, it's going to be one of those, depending on what zone, hardiness zone you're in, as to where it's going to grow faster, taller, bigger, and whatnot. And apparently in some places it can be considered invasive. And I guess that would be the places where it reseeds really well, and you've got native little baby, or not native, but you've got little baby trees popping up around it. So just something to be aware of depending on your area. In the Central Texas area, if you're in that area, just be aware of that. So you want to plant this in full sun. It flowers from May until the first frost, and then you want to cut off all those blooms once they've bloomed at that first frost. There are a few different cultivars or varieties: Shoal Creek, LeCompte, and Montrose Purple. They get 10 to 15 foot tall and wide, and again, they can be a tree, considered a tree, and you can train them to grow a certain way. So along with that, potentially invasive, they're easy to propagate, so that makes sense. Seeds, cuttings, and flowers can all produce new plants. So this one is really interesting. I know it's really popular in this area. Okay, so woody shrubs. We've also got a lot of rose varieties that are considered Texas superstars. One of them, Belinda's Dream, is my favorite. Then you've got the Knockout Rose and the Marie Daly. Now, neither of those three are pictured. I did have the Belinda's Dream last week pictured, but those are all considered Texas superstars. Now, these here that I've got on the screen are all in a research trial to determine which of these or all of them are a best fit for the Texas Superstar criteria. So all of these roses here are in a trial right now in the Harris County area, in the Houston area. And so it's going to be interesting to see which of those make the cut and which you might see in a Texas Superstar book in the future. So something exciting going on, a little research going on, and we'll see what comes of it. Okay, moving into trees. So I've just got a handful of trees here today. The Basham's Party Pink Crapemyrtle. It is kind of like the granddaddy of Texas crepe myrtles. They live a long time and they get very large. In fact, this might be one that I have in my yard. I was blessed with a lot of crepe myrtle plants when I moved there, and so some of them are probably older than me. But this one does well in full sun. The mature size is going to be 30 foot tall and up to 30 foot wide on the canopy. So it could have a multi-trunk or standard trunk. It requires low maintenance, low water use, but it does like well-drained soils. So these are easy to root and transplant. I can attest that most crepe myrtles are easy to transplant. Rooting them, I have not had good luck with though. So again, another one of those do as I say, not as I do. But okay, another tree that's popular and considered a Texas superstar is going to be the Lacey oak tree. It is a smaller version of an oak tree, does well in smaller landscapes. Does best in zone 7. You want to plant it in full sun, and it can get up to 30 foot tall and a 30 foot wide canopy. It's a deciduous tree and requires low water, but you don't want to overwater it. Okay, I believe this is our last tree, the Possum Haw Holly. So it's a deciduous large shrub or a small native tree. So this is one of those that is native and not introduced or adapted. You want to plant this one in full to part sun, and it can get up to about 12 feet tall and have a 6 foot wide canopy. It does produce berries through the fall and winter, so it makes a really pretty colorful plant in the fall and winter seasons. Okay, moving on to our specialty plants. I just have a couple of them pictured here. We've got ornamental peppers, and there's a few different varieties of those. They are actually considered annuals, so you are going to have to replace them every year. You want to put this in full sun, and it does produce a fruit from spring into fall. They do well in hanging baskets or containers. And you've got the Numex Twilight and Purple Flash. So again, those are considered annuals. They do well in full sun, and you're going to see the fruiting between spring to fall. Okay, so in addition to those specialty plants, and what we mean by specialty is, for the most part, they're a fruit, vegetable, or some other kind of specialty plant, not specifically considered an annual, perennial, or what have you. So in addition, we've got blackberries, broccoli, grapes, orchids, mandarins, oranges, and even a couple tomato varieties. So I invite you to look through the book, which we're going to thumb through just a little bit here. So just to go over my resources again, we've got the Texas Superstar website, the publication that I'm going to show y'all in just a little bit. Then we've got the Aggie Horticulture Earthkind Gardening website, and that Earthkind Plant Selector. So many of the presentation slides and pictures I used today came from some area horticulture agents who do the chat with the Green Aggies presentations. And so I really just want to say how much I appreciate them for letting me use their presentation slides. Instead of reinventing the wheel, we like to borrow the wheel. So I appreciate that. Also had some Master Gardener presentations that I used on here too. So I appreciate those. All right, let's move on to, well, we'll go ahead and end with my animals here, my past and current animals, and take time to smell the roses. Okay, so the next thing I wanted to go through is the Texas Superstar publication here, which you can see on the screen. And we're just going to thumb through it real quick so you get an idea. You've got the contents page, and you've got annuals, perennials, those per annuals, woody shrubs, trees, and specialty plants. It also talks about the U.S. hardiness zones. So if you're not familiar with that, I did mention the zones a little bit. So this has the information in there as well. But as you can see, we've got pages and pages. It's got a picture of each flower, the hardiness zone it does well in, what type of plant, what type of soil it does well in, any special notes, how big it gets, where to plant it. So anything you could possibly need to know about the plants in order to plant them, other than where to purchase them, then this book will get that for you. So you can see there's a lot more than what I mentioned in the last 30 minutes. The pages of annuals just go on. The perennials starting here, see there's that black stockings Napier grass that I told y'all I wasn't too familiar with. All right, so again, you can see there's a lot more here that I didn't mention. And again, you can get this publication from my office. You can go download it. You can even order it from our Texas AgriLife bookstore as well. I think there's a charge on that one though. But if you come get it from my office, I'll give you what I have until I run out. All right, so we'll just keep thumbing through here and go to show those hardiness zones real quick. So it may be hard to see on the screen here, but we've got the hardiness zones. It's got that is very hard to see. Let's see if can we zoom in? There we go. There we go. All right, so we've got the hardiness zones, 7, 8, 9, 10, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So you can look at that and kind of look and see exactly what areas you're in to get a better idea. Alrighty, so moving on from that, now I want to go over and do practice a little bit within this plant selector, which also you can search by the hardiness zone. You can search for a plant that you know the name of and go look and see if it works. It's going to be recommended for your area. Or you can start with your area and go and search for the plants that are known to do well in your area. So like I said, you can start from one end or the other. And I'm just going to pick a couple here. Let's see. The first way I want to search is I want to search for something that's going to do well in my area. So I'm in Camp County. That's within this C zone. And I want something that's going to go well in part sun and let's see here, habitat. I want it to be a ground cover. I don't know the names because there could be a few of them. And hardiness zone. We're going to choose zone 8. So we're more of in zone 8 than 7. So, okay, so show all plants. Okay, so larkspur was one that says it does well. Bluebonnet, obviously, you know that does fairly well here. Daffodils, Texas persimmon, rock rose. I actually have this one. So yeah, this one, it does really well in my yard, and I've got a couple of them planted there. So they're small flowers. It looks like a really miniature version of a hibiscus. So that's really cool. Yeah, I didn't know much about them. I just know they're in my yard. So, all right, that's cool. Let's go back now. Your Texas Superstar website. And you can even search for plants on the Texas Superstar website. So they've got a plant database here, and you can look up by the pictures. So let's just try hibiscus here. And search. Here we go. Okay, so we've got flare hibiscus. Most all of those are flare hibiscus, but you can see they come in a few different colors, even some yellows. Yeah. So, alrighty, y'all. Thanks for joining me. Next week is going to be our rainwater harvesting. So, if you have any questions, drop them in the comments, and I will get back to you. Thank y'all so much.